Hey everyone, welcome to this deep dive on, well, forgiveness. We got so many great sources from you guys in this one.
Yeah, it's gonna be good.
Bible verses, articles, blog posts, all focusing on what it really means to forgive, from that Christian perspective.
Yeah, especially kind of zeroing in on what Jesus himself taught,
Exactly.
which is always a good place to start, I think.
Right. Always. And one thing that's always stood out to me are those verses that connect how God forgives us to our own, responsibility to forgive other people.
Oh, for sure.
Like Ephesians 4.32, Colossians 3.13. It's all about forgiving as the Lord forgave you. It's such a powerful concept.
Yeah, it is like
Yeah.
it's like God is, setting the example.
Yeah.
Really showing us how powerful forgiveness can be.
Yeah.
When we receive forgiveness from God, it's like this huge weight lifted off our shoulders, and we should want to offer that same relief to others.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That makes total sense. It's like paying it forward, but with grace and mercy.
Yeah.
But then Matthew 6.1415 gets pretty real about what happens if we don't forgive.
Oh, yeah. Big time. There, Jesus is saying that if we refuse to forgive others, it gets in the way of our own forgiveness from God.
It's a two-way street.
It is. And if you think about it, the Lord's Prayer even reinforces that, right? When we ask God to forgive our debts as we forgive our debtors.
That's powerful. It's not just some optional good deed. It's like essential to the whole thing.
Exactly.
But this is what always gets me. Are we really expected to forgive everything? Like, how many times are we supposed to forgive someone who just keeps hurting us? I mean, that feels like almost impossible sometimes.
It's a good question. It's actually a question Peter asked Jesus directly. It's in Matthew 18.21-22. Peter suggested forgiving like 7 times, probably thought that was pretty generous.
Yeah.
But Jesus, his answer was radical. Not 7 times, but 77 times.
Whoa, 77 times. That's basically saying there's no limit, right? Like, it's not about keeping score.
Nope. 77 times basically represents, a boundless number. God's mercy is boundless, and ours should be too. Holding on to bitterness and resentment only hurts us in the end. Forgiveness is about choosing to release those feelings, not because the other person deserves it, but because we deserve peace.
That's such a good point. It's not about letting people off the hook. It's about, like, freeing ourselves from that burden. But I'm curious, how did Jesus actually live this out?
Well, one of the most powerful examples is on the cross. In Luke 23.34, while he's suffering, unimaginable pain, he prays, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing."
That's just incredible. To offer forgiveness at that moment, it's mind-blowing.
It really is. Forgiveness isn't about whether someone deserves it. It's an act of love and mercy that goes way beyond human understanding.
So we've talked about the command to forgive, the link between giving and receiving it, this whole idea of limitless forgiveness. But what about the how?
The how.
Like, how do we actually tap into that power to forgive, especially when it feels impossible?
You're right. There has to be something in these sources about that.
There has to be.
And there is. One story that I think really gets at this, though it doesn't specifically say forgiveness, is the parable of the woman washing Jesus's feet with her tears. It's in Luke 7.47. To me, it shows this powerful connection between that deep gratitude for being forgiven and then that outpouring of love that comes after.
Yeah, it's like those tears weren't just washing away dirt, they were washing away
Yeah.
everything, the weight of her past.
Yeah.
And then she was able to show this incredible love and devotion.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
It really speaks to the transformative power of forgiveness, not just for the person being forgiven, but for the one doing the forgiving too. It breaks the chains of bitterness, sets us free from anger, and opens us up to a deeper experience of love and grace.
It makes me think of Romans 5.8.
Yeah.
But God demonstrates his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. It's saying that God's love is so great, he offered us forgiveness before we even asked. How does that change our own ability to forgive?
Whoa. That is a profound question. It really gets to the heart of how Christians understand forgiveness. But to really understand how to do that, we need to look at some practical advice offered in the sources.
Yeah, it's like God just loves us that much. But like you were saying, it's one thing to kind of get these big ideas about forgiveness. It's another thing entirely to actually do it, live it out.
That's so true. It's about transforming our hearts, not just our, thoughts.
Totally.
And thankfully, you guys sent in some great sources that really offer some helpful guidance on how to, become more forgiving people.
That's awesome. Because honestly, sometimes I read those verses and I'm like, okay, I know I'm supposed to forgive, but how? Especially when it's something that really hurt.
Well, one thing that came up a lot in the articles and blog posts was prayer. A lot of writers emphasize that true forgiveness,
Yeah.
it's often a process, and it's not something we can always just do on our own.
Yeah.
We need to, lean on something bigger than ourselves.
So it's not about forcing yourself to say the words, I forgive you.
Right.
It's about admitting we need help
Yeah,
and asking God for the strength to let go of the anger and resentment. Yeah.
exactly. One writer even suggested, and this might sound kind of out there, praying for the person who hurt you. I
Mm.
know, right? But it can be really powerful. It's like
Wow.
choosing to see them through a lens of compassion, even if you don't feel it at first.
I can see that. Maybe over time your heart softens up a bit.
Exactly. Another practical thing I saw a few times was journaling.
Oh, I love journaling.
Right. Writing down your thoughts and feelings about what happened about the person who hurt you,
Yeah.
it can really help.
It's like you're getting all that bad stuff out, but on paper,
Yeah.
not exploding on someone.
It's a safe space to be honest about the hurt and anger you're feeling without needing to confront that person right away.
And you can start to untangle those feelings a little bit, see things more clearly, maybe even see some patterns in your own life that are making it hard to forgive.
Wow, that's a great point. We tend to focus on the other person, but sometimes forgiveness is about our own healing.
Yeah. It's like a journey inward.
It is.
And sometimes you need a little help on that journey. A lot of the sources talked about therapy or counseling, especially if it's something really deep, past trauma or just a lot of resentment built up.
Yeah, it makes sense. Sometimes we need a professional, someone trained to help us deal with those really tough emotions.
And that's okay. It's like anything else in life. Sometimes you need a little extra help.
Yeah.
And that can be a therapist, a pastor, a good friend, even a support group. There are people who can walk alongside us on this path.
For sure. I think the big takeaway is that forgiveness, it's a process, not a switch. It takes time, intention, and honestly, a lot of hard work.
And grace, right? We got to be patient with ourselves, just like we're trying to be patient with others.
Mm.
We're going to mess up sometimes, but that's part of being human.
So true. No one's perfect at this. But the fact that we're even trying, that we're wrestling with these ideas, that shows God's grace is at work.
It reminds me of 1 John 1:9. If we confess our sins, he is faithful and just, and will forgive us our sins and purify us from all unrighteousness. It's like, we don't have to be perfect because God's got us covered.
It's reassuring, right?
It really is.
And that's the foundation of our own ability to forgive. We can offer forgiveness because we were forgiven first by someone who loves us, no matter what.
Which brings up an interesting thought. We've been talking about forgiving others.
Uh-huh.
But a lot of the sources you're looking at, they're specifically about Jesus' teachings.
Right.
So what does he say about being forgiven?
That's a great observation. It's easy to get caught up in the how-to of it all.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of these verses you picked, they're about that too. Acts 10:43, it says, everyone who believes in him receives forgiveness of sins through his name.
It's not about earning it. It's about believing and accepting it.
Yeah.
Like a gift.
Exactly. A gift. Freely given. Not something we can earn by being good enough.
So to forgive others, we have to start by accepting God's forgiveness for us, given through Jesus.
Yes. And that's where real transformation happens. When we grasp how deep God's forgiveness is, it changes everything. How we see ourselves, others even, life itself.
It's like being set free from this weight of guilt and shame. And then you're free to let go of bitterness and offer grace to others.
It's not condoning what they did. It's about breaking free from that poison of resentment.
And that's where the example of Jesus on the cross really hits home. He didn't wait for apologies. He just offered it, even while he was suffering.
It's powerful stuff.
It's radical. It's like true forgiveness isn't about conditions. It's about choosing to let go of the anger, whether they deserve it or not.
It goes against our human nature, It's a supernatural act of grace that can only come from a heart changed by God's love.
Wow. That's a lot to take in. This deep dive has been intense. We've covered so much. The commands to forgive, what happens when we don't, this crazy idea of limitless mercy, practical tips, and now this connection between being forgiven and forgiving.
We have. It's something we could talk about for hours. But hopefully, this deep dive has helped you understand what it means to both forgive and be forgiven.
And hopefully it makes you want to actually live it out. Because forgiveness isn't just an idea, it's a way of life.
It is.
And it can bring healing and hope to us and everyone around us.
Beautifully said. As we wrap things up, I want to go back to that woman washing Jesus' feet. It wasn't just about thanking him.
Right.
It was love. Love pouring out from a heart overflowing with forgiveness, something to really think about.
Yeah, it was more than just gratitude. There was something really, really deep there.
It really gets to the heart of what forgiveness is all about, doesn't it? It's not just crossing something off a list. It changes us.
Totally. And we've talked about how receiving God's forgiveness is like the key to being able to forgive others. But I'm curious, how does that change actually show up in our everyday lives?
Well, one of the biggest things is like a shift in perspective.
Yeah.
When we really get how much God has forgiven us,
Right.
it's like we finally see ourselves the way he sees us.
Not all messed up, but loved.
Exactly. Loved and accepted. And when that happens, it changes how we see other people, too.
Makes sense.
Instead of zeroing in on their flaws, we start to see their humanity, their struggles. We understand they need grace, just like us.
It's funny because we sometimes think forgiveness is about being weak, but what you're describing sounds more like strength.
It is strength. It takes a ton of strength to choose forgiveness, especially when you just want to lash out or get even.
Yeah, it's like choosing love over anger, grace over bitterness. And that's tough.
It is. It's really tough. And that's part of what makes forgiveness so radical. It's like operating on a whole different level, tapping into something beyond ourselves.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from all of this?
Ooh, good question. I think the biggest thing is this. Forgiveness isn't a finish line you cross. It's a journey. It's about constantly choosing love, even when it's hard.
And it's a journey we don't have to do alone, right? We've got our faith, our friends, and God who just loves us no matter what.
That's it. Perfectly said. And with that, I think we've come to the end of our deep dive. We hope this has inspired you to start or continue your own journey of forgiveness and to remember you are loved and you are forgiven.